There are some games that you just kind of know are going to be good before you play them, whether it's because of trailers or marketing or because you've played a previous game in the franchise, and you just know it's your thing. For me, Spider-Man 2 is one of those games, so it wasn't a question for me of whether or not I would like it, but rather how much I would. I'll admit my expectations were high. Adding Venom, my favorite Spider-Man villain of all time, to Insomniac's universe was such an exciting prospect to me that Peter Parker's second outing quickly became my most anticipated game of 2023, though I was worried about how Insomniac would write Venom into the story, given that he hasn't had much success outside of the comic books. I wouldn't get the answer to that question for a while though. Like Miles Morales' Rhino fight, Spider-Man 2 opens with an epic showdown between our two Spider-Men and the Sandman, and it appropriately sets the stage for what's to come. Sandman is massive, occupying multiple city blocks as he wreaks havoc throughout New York. It's the largest boss battle I've seen in the series, and it was just the first one. That grand scale isn't just limited to the major set-piece fights in the game either. Spider-Man 2 also has two stories to tell, one for Peter and one for Miles. While Peter is reconnecting with Harry Osborn and building the Emily May Foundation, Miles is figuring out his own unique identity as Spider-Man. Spider-Man 2's primary throughline focuses on Peter, especially once he dons the black suit, but Insomniac wisely decided to focus on the people around the heroes as well, and I'm not just talking about MJ and Genki. One of my favorite parts of Spider-Man 2 was discovering the fates of the villains that appeared in the PS4 original. Seeing what became of Mr. Negative, Rhino, Scorpion, and Shocker to name a few was exciting. Insomniac isn't doing one-off stories here. They're building their own Spider-Verse, one that delivers unique takes on Marvel's storied characters, and few are as storied as Venom. If you played Spider-Man 1, you probably know a little bit of Venom's story. Spoiler alert for Spider-Man 1's post-credits in 3, 2, 1. At the end of the game, it was revealed that Harry Osborn was bonded to what appeared to be the Venom symbiote in a healing tank to help him recover from a terminal illness, and it's with that knowledge that Venom's narrative begins. Shortly after Peter and Miles subdue Sandman in the game's intro, we're reintroduced to a now healthy Harry Osborn, and following that, the two form the Emily May Foundation, named for Harry's late mother and Peter's Aunt May. The game begins in earnest, however, with the introduction of Kraven the Hunter. Kraven is one of the original Spider-Man villains, and Insomniac's rendition of him is excellent. I never really liked Kraven before, but here he proves to be one of the most effective villains I've seen Spider-Man come up against. His depraved ideology, devoid of even the faintest hint of altruism, makes him seem so much more evil than anyone Spider-Man's faced before. Kraven's callous disregard for human life sets the stage for what becomes one of the most chaotic stories in Spider-Man history. You don't need to be familiar with the Spider-Man comics to enjoy the story Insomniac has crafted for Spider-Man 2, but my familiarity with them had me asking questions and trying to predict the narrative. Would Harry become Venom? How does Peter get the black suit? Is the black stuff in the tank even the Venom symbiote? Every time I felt I had predicted the outcome of a story thread, a curveball would come my way and subvert my expectations. Venom's story is one of my favorites in Spider-Man history, and Insomniac crafted a version of it that combines decades of lore to create something that can only be told in the medium of video games, combining stories told across the years into one that not only makes sense, but results in a stellar gameplay experience. Spider-Man 2 weaves a web of interconnected narratives, each of which set up different gameplay elements. The opening battle against Sandman sends a strong message that this new game is going to do things that simply weren't possible before. Early on, Miles takes a massive hit that sends him flying across multiple city blocks at high speed, showcasing the PS5's ability to load in assets at a ridiculous rate. Miles instantly launches back into the fray, and the fight continues without the PS5 breaking a sweat. This battle also sets up Sandman's challenges around New York, in which you fight clones of him to earn fragments of his memories. Each of those challenges can be found by just looking for huge piles of sand lying around. The more I progressed through the game, the more New York changed around me, making it feel so much more alive than it did in previous games. Buildings now have modeled interiors, and you can see people in them if you crawl around the windows. Buildings also suffer damage during missions, and the lighting effects across the entirety of the game are nothing short of breathtaking. One of my favorite additions comes into play when you respond to a crime happening somewhere in the city. Whichever Spider-Man you aren't playing as will sometimes join you or already be there handling things, and the two of you can team up to take care of the issue and interact with each other before they take off. It's a small thing, but it does so much to make it feel like the other Spider-Man isn't just doing nothing while you're in control of their counterpart. Insomniac is making powerful use of all of the PS5's features in Spider-Man 2. Ray traced lighting looks better than ever, particularly when paired with water. I found myself dropping into photo mode and snapping screenshots at various moments throughout my time with the game because of just how jaw-dropping it looks. The team also drew on their experience creating Ratchet and Clank for Mysterio's side quests. You walk into a portal, defeat enemies, and walk right back out into the world like you weren't just in a mind-bending alternate reality for the last few minutes, and it happens seamlessly. Every time I walked out of them, it still felt like some kind of wizardry had just occurred. When I looked behind me only to find the portal now an empty hoop I could walk through, I was impressed. It never got old. Even more impressive is how Spider-Man 2 handles fast travel. If you thought instantaneous load times were cool, check this out. How cool is that? It just zooms into the map and right into the action. This is the smoothest thing I've ever seen, and it's basically ruined fast travel for me in any other game. There are other small details as well, like the fact that Miles and Peter don't always wear the same outfit anymore. It's these small things that make everything feel that much more real, and I can't get enough of it. Insomniac changed nearly everything about how abilities work for Spider-Man 2. For starters, suit abilities are gone. In their place, both Peter and Miles have new ultimate abilities that evolve as you play through the game. Peter's begins with the spider arms and later harnesses the power of the symbiote when he's bonded with it, and Miles retains his Venom Blast, at least initially. I was happy to see the removal of suit abilities and mods because they made things a bit too complicated. I seldom changed my suit power either because I would simply forget to, or I just didn't care for the majority of them. The stock abilities Peter had in his arsenal in the original Spider-Man are the ones I stuck with for most of my multiple playthroughs of the game. Gadgets have also been simplified, down to 5 if you include the standard web shooters, meaning you no longer have to fumble with a weapon wheel in the middle of combat to get to the gadget you need. Instead, holding down R1 and pushing any of the DualSense's face buttons will activate one of your gadgets, which led to me using my full arsenal far more often than I did in previous games. My favorite this go around is the web grabber, which attaches webs to multiple enemies and slams them together, briefly stunning them. I use this one all the time. Gadgets are the same for both Spider-Men, but the same can't be said for abilities. Peter and Miles each gain unique abilities as they progress through the story. Miles starts out with most of the skills he had at the end of his solo adventure, while Peter has gained some new ones thanks to the spider arms that help him keep up with Miles' Venom powers. As you work your way down the skill trees, both Miles and Peter will gain new abilities they can equip to create different loadouts. Insomniac did a great job for the first time around with abilities for Miles, and they did just as well giving them to Peter for the first time. Mercifully, Insomniac kept just 3 skill trees in Spider-Man 2, one for Peter, one for Miles, and one for abilities they could share. The shared skill tree ended up being my favorite as it introduces changes that dramatically improve the gameplay experience. Little things like being able to corner sharply made a world of difference, and improved swinging speed does a lot to showcase just how capable the PS5 is. Of all of the Spider-Man's new tricks, there are 3 that stand out the most: the web slingshot, web wings, and parrying. That's right, Spider-Man can parry now, and with the introduction of the parry come heavy attacks that are otherwise unblockable. Parry timing is really forgiving, meaning you won't be getting pummeled to death because you were a frame off. I played with default parry time and found it more than sufficient, but if you're having trouble with it, you can lengthen the amount of time you have to successfully parry in the options. Parrying doesn't alter the flow of the game much really, but it's nice to have as an additional combat option. The web slingshot is to traversal as the parry is to combat. It's a nice option to have, but one that didn't really change much about how I played. There are specific areas set up to use the web slingshot from, but you can do it from just about anywhere. The slingshot is a great way to start a long journey across the city, but but I seldom remembered to use it. Instead, I would leap into the air or drop off a building and use a combination of swinging, web zips, point launches, and the new web wings to get wherever I needed to go. The web wings are every bit as cool as advertised. They feel almost as though Insomniac wanted to find a reason to test out what it would feel like to make Spider-Man able to fly. Every time I saw a wind current running between buildings or alongside a bridge, I couldn't help but take it for a ride. One of the side activities involves chasing drones using the web wings, and I had a ton of fun with these. The web wings are yet another way in which this game makes you feel like a superhero. But none of those ways is as potent as the act of smacking down bad guys. Playing as both Peter and Miles is more satisfying than ever, though I particularly enjoyed Peter's turn with the Venom symbiote. As Peter uses the symbiote, he becomes increasingly violent and, well, somewhat evil. There's a moment in which Peter wearing the symbiote suit decides to quit holding back against Kraven's hunters that's as cathartic as it is unsettling. Playing as symbiote Spider-Man is a blast. Enemies that were once challenging go down like nothing, and Spider-Man feels as though he's truly striking terror into his enemies. Even the moments I felt were weakest in the original Spider-Man had my hands glued to the controller in the sequel. MJ's stealth missions are dramatically better in Spider-Man 2, owing in large part to the fact that she can now fight back, and to the fact that they are usually much shorter than those found in the original. Boss battles are now mostly outdoors, getting rid of the awkward inability to fully utilize Spider-Man's powers in some of the most pivotal moments in the game, and bosses overall are much more impactful set pieces in Spider-Man 2 and help to push the narrative forward and keep the standard enemy encounters from overstaying their welcome. Mechanically, Spider-Man 2's boss battles feel largely the same as those from its predecessors, environmental changes notwithstanding. You still fight off one stage of the encounter, enter a QTE, then begin the next stage, though in my experience, the difficulty of Spider-Man 2's boss battles was noticeably higher. I died far more in Spider-Man 2 than I ever did in the original or Miles Morales, and that's a good thing. After years of having replayed both games multiple times, I felt I had the formula mastered. But Spider-Man 2 forced me to use more of my arsenal more often and actually adapt strategies unique to this game to keep Peter and Miles alive. Insomniac's take on Venom's origin is my favorite Spider-Man story in any medium in years. I haven't been this enthralled by Spider-Man since I was a kid. Every time I thought I knew what was going to happen, I was proven wrong. Despite having read loads of Spider-Man's adventures over the years, I was surprised and delighted more often than not by the direction the story took, and every time I thought it couldn't get any crazier, it did. It took me about 20 hours to finish Spider-Man 2, and I enjoyed every second of it. In fact, I enjoyed it so much that after I finished it, I kept playing until I got the Platinum, making my first Platinum trophy before a game's released. Spider-Man 2 is the PS5's greatest technical showcase, leveraging one of the best ray tracing implementations I've ever seen in its fidelity mode, making amazing use of the Ps5's SSD with nearly non-existent load times, rapid environmental shifts, and the coolest fast travel system I've ever seen in a game. The entire cast delivers excellent performances, it's backed by a soundtrack that would feel right at home in an MCU film, and it's doing all of this in a city that is twice the size of the original. Spider-Man 2 is the best superhero game ever made. It's the PS5's killer app, and for me, it's the best game of 2023. If you were waiting for a reason to buy a PS5, this is it.